REALISMscenery.com. Welcome back.
Ah, the great outdoors. A nice day for a hike and a swim, don't you think? But don't worry, I would never go swimming right after I ate. I'd wait about 30 minutes or so, right? Mom used to say that. How about you, Doreen? You want to go for a swim?
No. On second thought, hell no.
So where are we, and what does this have to do with model railroading? Well, as you can see, there's a railroad right here. Yep, there's nothing better than a visit to the area that you model. And that's exactly what we're doing here. This is deep in the mountains of West Virginia along the former Western Maryland Railway. This imagery is from Google Earth, and it shows just how remote the area is. So how did we get here? Well, the day we were swimming, we hiked in, but you can also take a great train ride into that very area. This part of the former railroad is now operated by the Durbin and Greenbrier Valley Railroad. They're based out of Elkins, West Virginia. They host a variety of fantastic excursion trains. If you like beautiful mountain scenery and or mountain railroading, nothing beats this bang for the buck. And believe me when I say it's an easy sell to your significant other. You see, the real reason I'm here is only secondary. So this is part of the area that I model, at least scenery-wise. I've always wanted to see the places that have inspired me through photos and video of days gone by. You know, with the technology that we have these days, it's real nice to be able to see stuff on Google Maps and Google Earth, but it's even better to see the real thing. From the scenery that the railroad travels through to the railroad itself. Yeah, and it sure doesn't hurt to have all that vintage equipment to ride on and get you there. We had a great time camping along the railroad, and we walked away with a lot of information, pictures, and video. Of course, we'll use that stuff in upcoming editions, so get out there and explore the area you model, if you can. Alrighty, let's get back to the real, model railroad. If you're all caught up, you'll know that in the last video, we completed the mainframes and the carts. As you can see here, we've added bolts and dowels to secure the modules to the carts, so when we move them around, they'll stay together. We've also made what I call spacer connectors. They're made to lock the two modules into position with that gap of 24 inches that separates them. It's not load-bearing, but they also make it easy to move the entire assembly as one piece. Yeah, just as important, they keep goofballs like me from accidentally knocking one of the modules out of position. You gotta remember, there's gonna be hidden bridges that connect the two modules together track-wise, so this is gonna keep everything all tied together. As you can see, there's one at each end of the layout, and this way I can get up in there and work behind there and not knock anything out of position. Okay, moving on to the sub-roadbed. As you know, each of the two module sections is 96 by 24 outer dimension. It's obviously different for an inner dimension. We're going to use half-inch plywood as our sub-roadbed. So we're going to start by cutting our half-inch plywood the long way. We're going to cut it to 22.5 inches wide. Now that the width is cut to 22.5, we can measure for the length, and that ends up being 94 and some change. So we're going to cut that end off. Now ahead of all that, we cut a bunch of these knot-free pine stringers so we'd have them at the ready. Can you guess what the width is? Same as the plywood, 22.5. Now we're going to wedge a couple of those stringers in there temporarily to check the fit of the plywood. And the reason we're not just going to randomly attach stringers now is based on what we talked about in one of the previous videos. We need to place them accordingly based on what equipment we're not trying to foul, such as switch machines and so on. But we'll get to that. Okay, this is a layout map that I created and printed out. This particular map shows the proposed track diagram with turnout locations and measurements. The numbers you see are elevation levels. The town side of the layout, which we're looking at, is relatively flat, so we're going to start on this side. And I noticed there's no turnouts in this location, so this is a good place to start with our first stringer. Now that we know where the safe spot is to put this first stringer, I've measured over according to that map. We're using a small piece of plywood as a height gauge. The piece of plywood is from the same plywood that the sub-roadbed is, so it will accurately let us position the height of the stringer. Roger that, we're using Craig screws, and we talked about them in a previous video. They not only provide a strong mount, but we can easily move them if necessary. Now that we got our first stringer in place, we'll move on to the next one. We're moving from one side of the module to the other and checking for turnout locations as we go. We're also going to account for where the grades are by placing the stringers in the proper locations at the specified heights. Okay, here's where it gets a little tricky. Before we start cutting the right-of-way contour in the plywood, we have to see where we're working with from an overall standpoint. We have to take into consideration that the grades on this layout start on one module and continue on to the other module if it's separated by 24 inches. We have to plan carefully, so those are the grades illustrated in red. Now while we're at it, we also have to take into consideration, because of those grades, we have to cut reliefs in the side of the frame. And by relief, I mean like a notch, and those are illustrated in yellow. As we start doing this, I take a lot of time to start cutting one to make sure I'm in the right spot, and I refer back to my map and the grade profile and the whole thing. At least for me, I have to try to visualize what I'm doing. It's one thing to work from a plan, but visualization is the key for me, and as you can see, I'm doing my best to imagine the track diagram as it would appear on the layout. I know I say this a lot, but if you remember from a previous video, we printed out full-size track diagrams. Well, we also printed out several maps and illustrations to help us not only visualize, but plot features onto the real layout. As I've mentioned before, this layout is actually a 4x8 layout. It's just split down the middle and separated by 24 inches. And because of that, it's a little more time consuming. If you were to recreate this in a classic 4x8 footprint, it would be a lot easier. Now, I can't say we planned it this way, but we're actually working around the layout in a clockwise position. I can't believe we got this much done this afternoon. We installed the stringers, the risers, the sub-roadbed, we cut the relief notches, and now it's time to check our work against those full-size track diagrams. And everything was held together nicely by those spacer connectors that we made. Hey, you know how I always say nothing is written in stone and things can and will change? Well, we had to make a few changes here and there, but nothing major. Speaking of changes, hey, what's in that box? You'll have to wait till the next video to find out. Now, I know not everybody's going to go to the trouble of printing out these full-size track diagrams, but it really did give me a lot of help in visualizing what the layout might look like. We made a lot of progress, and I was really surprised that we got all this done in one afternoon. It even gave me time to work on fine-tuning some of the terrain features. There are, of course, a few things left to do, but it's nice to know we can get started on the hidden track bridges that'll connect the two modules. I was really happy that I got some time to work on this river area. Yeah, the riverbed was one of those changes I was talking about. We had to shift it a bit to make it work better with a couple of turnout locations, as well as where the railroad bridges would be located. Well, truth be known, benchwork is not my favorite of the many aspects involved in layout construction, but all in all it worked out with anything major, and I'm really looking forward to moving on to the next phase. How about you? Alright, we're going to leave the benchwork alone for today, and in this last image you can see the entire assembly as it sits now. Let's move on, shall we? You gotta love seeing that some of that equipment is showing some age, huh? Yep, that locomotive was one that our buddy Brandon Bennett painted for us in the last video. He used the custom decals that I created, and then I gave it a little age along with some of my rolling stock. Brandon also applied the spruce theme to a few cabs that I had. While he was at it, I asked Brandon to add some rear lighting. Sweet, huh? Yep, no doubt they'll look great running around the layout at night. And on that note, be sure to subscribe, stay tuned, and follow the progress. This is Joey Ricard of TrackSideScenery.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.